Yes, the purple ranks are large now. Fair. There are only cat people here? Hmm. Oh, that reminds me. I did say that I would make that daily theme today, didn't I? Hello. He might say, I do. Question is, do I say it now or later? Word on the imaginary streets is something new is dropping? Hmm. When painting. I know things that I just don't know if I can say, so I'm opting not to. But it won't be today. One neural interface hookup? Good question. Discretion, my name is AC. Wouldn't say I know all the things, but I do know a lot of things. Even some things I might not know I know. Edge regen button? Use zoom at 1 for that. Custom zoom 1. If it... Oh, there's David. Hello.
How do we...
David has sound. If you didn't hear him, either it's because he only spoke briefly, or you need to restart.
We're just the thingy. Uh-oh, did I give the wrong? Did I give a bad link? I might have given a bad link. Should have given that. Yeah, I think I did. Oops. There we go. Fixed it. Bad. Okay, let everyone come on. Let me know what looks good. And we'll get started.
All right, looks like we're starting to level up.
Hello. All right. Welcome to the Midjourney Weekly Office Hours. As the name suggests, we do it every week at Wednesday, 12 p.m. Pacific time, plus or minus a little bit because I'm usually late. And yeah, so what we do is we talk a little bit about what we're thinking about, what we're working on, and take questions. So right now, there's a lot of people working on a new front-end version of Midjourney, which is going to be on web and mobile. We have prototypes. The prototypes are getting better every week. There's a lot of debate right now on the website in terms of like what is good enough, which is really hard to say. It's going to be really different from the previous stuff we had people alpha test, like really, really different, but I think it's much, much better. I think the biggest question is how much do we try to put recommendation engines in there that are like more sophisticated than the front page, and how much do we try to put social features in there, which are more sophisticated than the current page? And I don't think I have the answer to that, but those two questions will probably determine a lot around the launch dates for those things. I think we're getting pretty close with something better than the front page. That's just sort of like more dynamic and more filterable. So I think that the explore stuff will be a lot better. The create page is also like much, much, much better. So I think we're going to have something pretty great. Similar questions on the mobile side, like, what level of polish do we put on our mobile stuff versus just letting people have something they can play with? I'm not sure. Those are things that we're debating a lot right now, and hopefully we'll have some understanding of it in the next month or so, in terms of like what how do we make the decisions on when to start testing versus releasing, etc. One of the things that's a little scary is because there's so many people on the platform. Like, it's not like a normal startup where you get it out as fast as possible and 3 people use it. It's like we get it out and then like, 1 million people immediately use it, and it could like, it's just a little scary. And then there's difference between like launching it to the entire user base versus letting people like who already are, onboarded versus onboarding new users onto the apps. And so that onboarding new users is a lot scarier than having existing people test it. But also some of the benefit is in onboarding new people because there's kind of like a 15-step process right now for signing up for Midjourney, which is not very friendly. And we think that's probably one of the biggest things making it hard for people to come on right now. Yeah, so that's probably the number one thing. We're working on V6 still, but we, instead of releasing like in the last week, which I think we could have done, we decided to try to be a bit more ambitious and try to get like more performance in. I think that put us a little bit back at square zero, which is unfortunate, but we are making some slow progress. And I'm hoping that in the next week or two, we'll start to have more visibility into when we're going to do a V6 launch. I think there's a chance we'll be able to launch the in-painting plus new aesthetic update, which we'll call 5.3, sometime next week. This is a bit more dependent on Discord than on us, but I think there's a chance that we'll see that next week, which would be great. We'll update the aesthetic, so it should be look a little more fresh. And then we're going to make this in-painting feature, which would kind of pop up inside of Discord. I think it's desktop only, but let you do some in-painting. I think we feel a little mixed about in-painting. Like, it definitely like doesn't just always work and do anything you want it to do. It does work a lot better than the other, I think it, than like most of the stuff out there. But like, I think sometimes it's easy to look at other people's examples of in-painting and make assumptions about how easy it is to use as a feature. And it's definitely not as easy to use as a feature as like just making pictures. So I think it's a bit more of an advanced user thing, and it's probably not for everyone, but I definitely hope that the people who, use in-painting elsewhere would, enjoy our in-painting more because it's sort of using the same model. So it should be more consistent. Yeah, and then let's see. We started doing these surveys, the sort of demographic psychometric surveys, and they've been really interesting. We don't have all the results yet. I'll probably share some over the coming weeks, but we discovered some pretty big things about the Midjourney aesthetics and who exactly does the like image ratings and things like that. We definitely find that we have more male than female users. We have like 80, it's like 80% male right now, which is unfortunate. And then a lot of people who are rating the images are older users, which is interesting and cool. What this means is that like a lot of the signal that our algorithms are adapting the aesthetics for are adapting the aesthetics towards a sort of more like there's a certain degree of aesthetics that's universal, but then there's certain elements that are like there's definitely such a thing as objective beauty, but then there's also a sort of thing as subjective beauty. So like everybody rating is great and it helps us learn the sort of objective bits. But then some of the demographic biases in the ranking we're actually starting to decouple, and we can see how there are like there's definitely a male bias on the aesthetics as well as an older bias on the aesthetics. And I want to I just want to thank everybody for doing the ratings in general and doing the surveys. Like, keep doing it because we do use all the data. One of the things we've been thinking a bit about is how some of those feedback loops might further reinforce the biases in the user base. Like maybe, and also it helps us sort of understand how the aesthetics have changed over time. So one of the things that we did was interesting is we kind of tried training versions of the system that were sort of only based off of like male ratings versus female ratings, just to kind of look at like an extreme example. One of the things that we found was really interesting was that the female aesthetic version of Midjourney looks a lot more like V3 in terms of it's like a little bit lower contrast, more pastels, a little bit more abstract. And then the sort of high contrast HDR, strong lighting is definitely more from the male side. And then we tried looking at like older demographics versus younger demographics. And the older demographics definitely prefer like warm colors and sort of grunge, I don't know what to call it, like weathered things. And then there's definitely like the younger demographics are definitely going for like stronger, like neon colors and darker images. It's really interesting. So we're definitely seeing how like like it's possible that some things that have happened over time, like for example, a lot of people prefer the V3 look still and wish they could get it back. We weren't really sure if that was an algorithm change that we did, but it might have actually been a demographic change because we had more women in the community around V3 than we did in V5. And we don't really know why that's true. Like, it's sort of, I mean, it might just, we just don't know. Like, it was like, we had like probably 50% more women in around the V3 era than the V5 era. I mean, it was 30% versus 20%. So, like, the relative is, 50% more, but yeah. It's been really, it's actually possible that, like, a lot of some of the look of the V3 was from having a lot more women who were doing ratings and feedback loops into the algorithm. And it's possible that, like, over time, like, this slight male bias has like actually pushed the user base to being more male and has pushed the aesthetic into a different like high contrast, high dynamic range thing, which is really interesting. And it kind of makes us step back and say things like, oh, you know what? We were thinking of making a V3 like model, but the V3 aesthetics were maybe actually just from the biases and the ratings, and it maybe isn't actually an algorithm thing. So that's making us like step back and sort of just think a lot about this stuff. And so some things we might be able to do in the near future is we potentially could like renormalize the ratings to potentially make it balanced across demographics, to make the aesthetics balanced across demographics. Or we might even at some point like allow people to customize things a bit and kind of like tell the system a bit about themselves, and it might uh, have a better chance of just guessing what you like. So that might be interesting too. I think exactly how we expose it there's a lot of questions there. I really don't know what the right thing to do is. Another thing we've been playing with is the geographic customizations. So like one thing we've noticed that we've known historically is that the Japanese and Asia user base in general actually has very different aesthetic preferences to like Europe, say. And we actually have to hand tune the aesthetics on Niji more than we have to tune them on the American side. Because we have sort of so much less data for the, say, like the Asia users. But with some of the new data we are getting, we actually can pull that out more. And the system actually looks a lot more like how we were hand tuning it, but without tuning it by hand. And yes, we've even thought about like allowing it to maybe customize regionally too, to some extent. Though we're still investigating like what's the difference between France and Germany, we were playing with earlier. It was interesting. We didn't do France and Germany. We did, sorry, Germany and the UK. We did notice some like slight aesthetic differences between Germany and the UK. And like definitely differences between like Europe and America and Asia. It's definitely interesting to kind of look at it. So we're starting to kind of pull apart. So basically, kind of how a big part of the aesthetics of Midjourney is sort of like there's a bit of a feedback loop where it learns from the community. And so one of the challenges is that like, our community is more male than female. It's sort of like more over 30 than under 30. And it's more in North America than international. So that means is that like, if you kind of take all the data, weigh it evenly, and then push it back out to everybody, the aesthetics will kind of bias towards those natural user biases. And so in order to try to have sort of like a reduced biased system, as well as like a system that just people like in other regions and demographics as much, it's important for us to be able to start disentangling that. And so I think it's been really, really interesting to start to look at that. It's going to take us a bit of time, frankly, to finish the investigations. But we're already learning like probably more in like a few days about aesthetics than we've learned in a very long time. So that's been really exciting. We will publish some images and some statistics at some point for the community so everyone can see. It's definitely kind of provocative. We can kind of turn it up and be like, here are the extreme, like male versus female versions of a single image. It's pretty cool. There's a lot of stereotypes, but I don't know. Like, that's uh yeah. um yeah, there's things that you would expect, like, obviously sometimes like characters are ambiguous. Whether a character should be male or female might be ambiguous, and if someone is male, they tend to prefer those ambiguous characters are male, and if they're female, they prefer the ambiguous characters are female. If they're in Asia, they tend to they tend to prefer that the ambiguous like ethnicity is Asian. Or if they're German, they tend to prefer the ambiguous ethnicity seems to be German. Like it's some that there's some that's sort of obvious. What's less obvious to me is like how lighting and colors seem to change among demographics. So that's been really surprising. The sort of like lighting and detail in Asia seems really different than in Europe, and I don't really know what the words are for it, but it's probably some kind. It's like an anime-like bias. It's interesting, but it's not strictly anime. But it's interesting. And then there's much more of like this, like grunge versus neon versus like dynamic range versus pastels and high contrast. Like there's definitely like that stuff is there's a lot of really big differences there, which are interesting. And we're doing some surveys right now where we kind of confirm this is true. Like we did it among the guides and mods where we showed some images that were optimized for male versus females, for example. We said, which prints do you prefer? And then are you male and are you female? We saw the females prefer the female optimized ones, the males for the male ones. Not like, not like only the males go to the male one, only the female, but like a lot more than you'd think. Like it basically kind of came out, which was really interesting. We tried doing like like a non-binary one, but I think the problem with the separating out for the non-binary genders is that it was actually also age biased. So like the people who who say that they're non-binary tend to be like the median age might be like 20 years younger, and so you get this sort of age bias in the aesthetics too, which was interesting because we kind of saw this like bisexual lighting like at first when we told it to do non-binary, but then we kind of also see the neon stuff in general for younger populations. So it's really interesting kind of pulling it all out, and it's been really it's been like probably one of the more interesting things that I've seen in the last month or two on our research side. And we'll definitely publish some stuff about it, and we're definitely going to do more surveys, um, to try to get more of an understanding still. But probably in the future, we're going to have a part on our website where you can kind of like tell us about yourself, and we'll just give you like free hours in exchange for it. And they might even help you customize the stuff around it. Again, it's not clear that like your gender is the most important thing for determining your aesthetics. Probably is not. But one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to ask a lot of questions, and then we're actually going to correlate those against the aesthetics that people are choosing. And we're going to try to discover which questions actually do most determine things about aesthetics. Some of these may be like a artistic personality test, and some of these may be things like age and gender and location. So they'll be like, are you introverted or extroverted? I even want to try doing some value ones, like what are your values? There's like a value test. And I'm kind of curious we're just going to have to give a lot of questions out, and we're going to see how, like what is actually correlated with aesthetics. And in an ideal world, we would kind of do these tests and we would have a sense of like, okay, here are like the 5 things that most tell us about what you're going to like. And we ask those questions as part of the onboarding, and then like kind of give it a little bit of a, uh, shot at helping to kind of, because like when people ask for things like a cat, there's just so much unspecified stuff, right? And so, there's a universe where we use that to help. So we're also like working on better user interfaces that just have more variety in them in general. So another way we may end up using this is just debiasing the algorithms, having them come out with a lot more variety, and then giving people bigger grids. So that way people can kind of like just sort of pick out what they like on the fly. I think the latter I'm like more interested in, to be honest, because like giving people more variety is a huge goal for me, and letting people explore is really important. But at the same time, like it feels kind of profound to look at the aesthetic biases and what they might correlate with. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of profound. I think no one's ever been able to do that before. So, like, that's really interesting. Right, checking in now. Everyone, okay, everyone can hear me fine. Um, yeah. Um, let's see. what other things are going on. Um, yeah, V6, V5.3 website, aesthetic test. We're doing a lot of cool storytelling research. The storytelling team is going. Um, and yeah, some secret projects. I did. So I was kind of closing my eyes and sort of brain dumping a little bit on some of the cool stuff. But um, yeah, why don't we do like a bit of a lightning round? And people can ask some questions that way because I haven't really been watching the chat. Um, but yeah. Which outputs are correlated with which styles and aesthetic? Yeah, I think when you start to look, like when we show, one of the things that we do when we are looking at the aesthetics is we tell it to kind of like exaggerate the differences between male and female preferences, like, and then that kind of gives you like a pattern match. You can tell it to like exaggerate things like beyond what it really is, and then you kind of very quickly you learn like a lot really quickly when you look at the exaggerations. Hopefully, in painting will be next week, but we'll see. Um, I think we're doing a square selection for the in painting. We can do other things too. I thought image weights for individual images works now, but I'm not sure. I thought it works. I can ask if not.
They work. There might be some restrictions on them. I have to double
Yeah.
check on.
There's these things called big five personality traits. And so the big five personality actually isn't unstable. It's pretty stable from year to year. And so one of the last things we checked in the test was a big five personality test. And so that those like whether yeah, and so I haven't actually looked at like the introvert versus extrovert aesthetics yet, but I'm very curious what that looks like. Uh, in general, like it's hard. We're gonna try to like basically break everything out and look at how correlated things are, and then we'll be able to just start to say like what actually is like more affected on things, like what affects what by what. Uh, yeah, I definitely think that like having something that shows different diverse aesthetics is important. That's probably like the most important thing. Video. I mean, there's definitely some people working on video. I don't think we have a specific timeline because we don't want it to be shitty. And I think right now most of the video stuff is kind of not good, but I do think that when we do it, it'll be good. It is hard to say when that is. We have looked at like trying to find more professional like raters and see if they're like who are people in high taste, you know? Of course the thing is like what a lot of artists think looks good is not necessarily what regular people think looks good. So there's definitely like yeah, we're definitely looking at like trying to break things out a lot. Mm. Uh, daily fast hours instead of monthly. I guess monthly gives people more control, but it like doesn't necessarily. Um, yeah. I mean, if you want a daily fast hour, just do some ratings once a day and you get an hour pretty easily. You can do ratings on the website. That's probably my best suggestion. We're probably not doing an API anytime soon because I feel like we have to moderate the usage a lot. Um, and it's not clear that it's actually like it'd be pretty distracting. Um, not sure what IW2 and personalized image weights are. Maybe you can say more. Will the Niji data be in V6? We're looking at combining the datasets together more. We'll see. David, how are you? I'm okay. I'm on some antibiotics because I was like a little sick, and their antibiotics are making me feel a lot better, but also like a little tired, to be honest. But I'm doing good. We're not really sure what the V6 resolution will be right now. I'm sorry. Um, don't have to rate your stuff to make a difference. We don't use the emojis. We only use the rankings and stuff like that. Probably shouldn't say exactly what we use, but the spider that meditates and runs a virtual brain. Oh, that's an old story. Called a Portia spider. I wrote it down for you. And in the channel, we're not doing the alpha website anymore. We're kind of working on a different thing. I'm not sure how the per image thing works. Just maybe Ancient can write something down, or somebody can write something down on the channel. Stylized in V6 should be similar to 5.2, and 5.3 will be similar to 5.2. Will there be a 3x3 grid in V6? So we don't know exactly what V6 is going to look like right now because we took a bit of a step back. I think it's possible that it's a 4x4 grid, but I can't say for sure. But I would like it if it was. I think I would like it if it was like 16. That would be kind of cool, personally. But we'll see. The video model working on is a general model. It will also work for anime. We don't really have a good way to do zoom in right now. But it would be cool in the future. Yeah, we will definitely. I think we're gonna publish a paper on the. We're gonna publish a paper on the differences in aesthetics between personality types. Don't think V6 is leaning towards abstraction. I'm not sure what that means. V6 should hopefully just be a lot better at interpreting your text, and the aesthetics should be better, and it should be more coherent. Probably bigger batches or higher resolution. I'm not sure. Yeah, telling people they can DM the bot might be a good idea. I agree. We don't have an ETA for V6 right now. We thought about releasing something this month, but we kind of didn't feel like it was a big enough improvement. We feel more like V.5.5. We're not sure we want to put the energy into doing that right now instead of just pushing straight to V6. One thing we are thinking of doing is trying to increase the speed for Mega and Pro tiers. So we're starting to get faster GPUs online, but we don't have enough of them for all the users. So we're thinking of as we get them, as they trickle in, we put them at the higher tiers first, and as we get more and more, we trickle them down lower and lower until eventually everybody gets them. So I think sometime this month we're going to try to increase the speed for Mega and Pro tiers. Basically, we have ones that are 4x faster and things that are 2x faster. We could try to put the 2x faster for Pro, the 4x for Mega right now until we have enough 4x to push those to Pro. And then eventually the 2x will flow to 30 to the standard and the basic. But it may take a while because it's a lot of GPUs, and there just aren't enough GPUs right now to give everybody to basically for everybody. So we're using 12 different. No, I think we use 13 different data centers right now for all the GPUs. It's pretty intense. So as one data center starts getting new GPUs, we can't immediately replace everything on the whole service. I think we're definitely. I think an ideal world for aesthetic equilibria is we try just to figure out as quickly as possible what the default that user likes. In an ideal world, we'd kind of have a personality test. We'd figure out what they like. That's kind of the default. But then we constantly try to push them outside their kind of comfort zone and help them explore new aesthetics. But there should be kind of different levels of maybe if there's a 16 by 16, the center 4 are our best guess, and then everything around the 4 are crazier stuff. You could imagine where a certain percentage is always conservative, and a certain percentages are always crazy. We are looking at some control net features. We have some tests that seem to work, but we don't have a specific date on when we would ship it. Do camera settings like aperture or lens do anything in Midjourney? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. You have to kind of use --seed and try locking the seed and playing with it. I don't think people do it on Twitter, but definitely has an effect sometimes. Like if you say it's a film image, for example, or you say it's a long exposure, those have a lot of effect. Who annotates your data? Do you outsource? It's mostly the users. We don't really pay for any, we pay for very little data annotation right now. I don't think LoRa's are important. I think it's just, that's good if you have a small model and you want to make it do a small model, so like a single thing, but it doesn't really make sense for the bigger models that we do, which can kind of do everything. We're probably not going to show any V6 outputs because they wouldn't be representative because we're kind of starting from scratch a little bit. But if we feel pressure, we could end up pushing it as a 5.5. The Big Five test is actually, I mean, it's not perfect. Like the really good Big Five test is like 300 questions and it tries to make things as stable as possible. We did the 10 Big Five test, which is not as stable. But Big Five in general is a very statistically, is like the most statistically tested and accepted form of psychometric testing. So check out the Wikipedia if you're curious about it. I think our 3D, one of our 3D people are on three people are on vacation a little bit, so not as much going on in the 3D space, but it will be great. We are not going to accept crypto as payment. I'm sorry, it's just pain. Maybe there's an easy way to do it. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah, I feel it's sort of, I'm trying to kind of avoid crypto stuff in general because it can be kind of um polarizing in a way that I don't think adds value to us, but I could see an argument for people who maybe like certain countries it's easier to pay with crypto. It's interesting because like they may not have credit cards. Maybe there's a way to do it. I don't know. 5.3 might be next week. We'll see. Hopefully next week, but hard to know exactly. Um, Interesting. Have you thought about the paradox of choice for larger grids? It's really interesting. I have not. I think it makes sense. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I think what I could say is that internally we use bigger grids. We've been using bigger grids for nearly a year. Internally, when we tune the algorithms, we always use 4x4 or 8x8 grids. That's 16 or 64 images. And pretty much everybody converges on the 64 image grids after a few weeks of working with images. And almost, and no one, basically no one ever really goes beyond that. So I think there's something about the 14 and 16, 14 and 6, so 16 and 64, which are sort of like real things. I don't know exactly what it will look like, but I think we need to push in that direction and see where it breaks down. I have seen some cool video generation things from other startups. I don't really think I feel a little bad for them because it's not clear that, I don't think making specialized models like that makes sense because they rely too much on the quality of the 2D model and everything else. So we were originally going to start with 3D actually, like Midjourney was going to be 3D only, but then I kind of realized that the user interfaces were going to be the same as 2D and that the 2D models were going to have too much of an influence on the 3D. Like the 2D model was going to be used for 3D. And so I realized I kind of had to do 2D first. We're kind of slowly working ourselves back to 3D. But the thing is like the 2D is kind of the fundamental thing. So basically it's sort of like all the energy being put to the 2D model is just going to make our 3D and video stuff so good. It's kind of impossible for there to be any other offerings, at least to my knowledge. So I wish I know a lot of people, yeah. I wish some people would just join Midjourney. There's been a few people who we made job offers to, who are like, who I think the VCs were whispering into their ears, like, why would you work with Midjourney when we could give you millions of dollars to sell your company to Adobe in 16 months? And it's kind of like bitter and dark that people would rather try to build something fake and then flip it to like a big tech company than to try to make some like more long-term home for themselves. But I mean, I get it. Like a lot of people who Uh, yeah, it's sort of like, what do you pursue in life? It usually comes from like your upbringing a little bit. Um, like my parents, like my dad, I think for some reason like wanted to be a dentist because it was sort of like one of those. He was kind of learned, kind of felt like when he heard like when he was younger that it was like if you're a dentist, you kind of always will like have a good living and you'll be always kind of like safe and stable lifestyle. And then like as a kid growing up, like my parents are stable, but it's like you kind of realize that stability is not necessarily like the only thing in life. So you kind of do things that are more risky. You kind of see this over and over again. You have like immigrants that, and then you have like the generation, you have the immigrant generation who was trying to survive. You have the generation who's like now thriving, and then you have the generation that realized that thriving isn't necessarily being happy and now being more risky and like being artists or whatever. It's like I don't know. Obviously, that's just a bit of a pattern, but yeah, I definitely see a lot of people who could be contributing a lot to the science and art of the space, who instead is trying to make like a big quick buck, which it sucks and it triggers me a little bit. But I get it how it's like, it's kind of like you're built a certain way to seek something sometimes from a young age. Um, so I don't want to hold it against anyone. Yeah, I think we have a lot of people who have aphantasia in the Midjourney community. I think it's higher than the baseline. Some of our original developers are also having aphantasia, which is cool. Maybe that's just when you can't like visualize images, so they're kind of like visualizing through the use of technology. We have not done studies on mega plan users versus power. That's interesting. Could try that at some point. It's a cool thought. Um, yeah, so I think there's this idea of like, is it good to have the algorithms push people into an echo chamber? I think that in general, the echo chambers are bad. However, I think there's an argument that like certain aesthetics from certain cultures or demographics have never really had a space of their own to echo and to kind of try to find themselves. And it's possible that it might be morally important for us to help create spaces for those alternative cultures and demographics to evolve their own aesthetics. I think there's a possibility of that, and then at the same time, though, I think I watched too much Star Trek as a kid, and in Star Trek, like there's kind of like no race and gender. Everyone's just like minds. I think there's an argument also sort of beyond demographics that the goal is to kind of make the community as explorative and creative as possible. So I think that's sort of more important. But I do sometimes look at some of these demographics and I'm like, wow, if this demographic could kind of work together, they might discover some interesting things. So maybe it's not based off demographics, maybe it's just purely based off aesthetics, but there's something going on, and I'm definitely trying to think about what makes sense right now. Um, it's cool to gift subscriptions. Right now, our payment infrastructure is really in a bad place, and we're trying to rewrite it. And once we rewrite our payment infrastructure, we're going to do a lot more cool payment things. But right now, like, there's some things that are possible and some things that are not. And so we're generally limited with how innovative we can be in billing. Okay, I think we're gonna go to voice soon. I'm gonna try to skip. Do you guys train on stock images? I don't really, to be honest, I think stock images like make the models worse. We try to blacklist all those sites. I don't think stock photos are where we go for like, yeah, I don't know. There's a certain blandness to stock photos. Um, Daily theme is now Catboy. That's cool. I just want to emphasize that we should probably have a cat gender balanced future of both cat boys and cat girls. Cat beings. I like that. Cat people. We're just cat people. Yeah. Catkin. Oh, that's kind of nice. Um. Okay. I think let's try to go some voice things now.
Cool. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, David. My name is Sylvester. I'm calling from United Kingdom, from small town Derbyshire, and I'd like to start a little bit with something different because recent office hours you always focus on technical things like models, data generation, servers, and updates and everything. I'd like to ask you a couple of art questions. You mentioned some time ago that you work for NASA, you did something for NASA, and you have some kind of design business. So maybe I can ask a little bit about that. And to start differently, I want to ask you: is there any good joke, mid-journey joke you ever had, and can you share it with me? I collect jokes, and I have a couple MJ jokes, so I want to hear. Do you ever heard any mid-journey jokes?
There was a pretty good meme at one point where it was like the Midjourney starter pack. I don't know if you can find this. Where it was like somebody's like figures staring into the distance, like strong like yellow blue colors. There's like there was this the Midjourney starter pack that was pretty good. It was kind of like a meme for Midjourney users.
Okay,
But
if someone on chat had this, and
yeah,
VC
that.
yeah. Can I tell you one of my jokes? Because that's my
Yeah.
meaning and the jokes. So from time to time the jokes comes and in different variations. So today I have this kind of two cavemen sits in the cave. They just ate the big chunk of the hunted meat, and the fire is slowly dying off. They are so happy and very satisfied. And this is very rare in caveman life because most of the time you just run away. You cold and everything hunting you. So they sitting around this fire, and one of the cavemen's like, with the pleasure. The other caveman look at him and saying, the first caveman lift up on his legs, take the little coal from the fire, walks to the cave wall and paint the buffalo. The other caveman look at the picture, point his finger and say, / imagine caveman with spear. And the first caveman look at him back and say, this prompt is too worthy. I don't know. Is that funny? But the short one was why the prawns didn't cross the road.
I
know why.
I don't know why.
Because someone forgot to add / imagine.
Oh,
yeah, that's more like a kid joke. The other question, quick about art. Sometimes you have like this, when you create art, you have like this jaw-dropping moments. And I understand Midjourney is collection of art and IT, kinda. Do you remember first picture you saw made with Midjourney that made your jaw drop? Do you remember that picture? Do you look at this picture from time to time? Can you tell me what this picture was and why your jaw dropped?
Yeah, there was this mystic lighthouse. Probably have it. Let me look for it.
Can you post it on the VC chat so I can?
Yeah, there was this lighthouse picture, and it was really good. It was some kind of it was an arcane lighthouse. I think I found it. It was an arcane lighthouse, and it was just like better than anything I would have imagined for the words arcane lighthouse.
Okay, do you remember how long time ago you created this picture?
Yeah, I'm finding it right now. Let's see. It was January. I think it was, yeah, early January, December 2021, it looks like.
December 20. Wow. So Midjourney, from the moment when it's wowed you, it's only like 2 years old, like even less.
Yeah, I'm gonna post it. I have the picture. I'm trying to, where did it go? Into downloads? Yeah, unnamed.
You see, you can't find your most jaw-breaking picture. And
I
if you,
found it.
yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm gonna post it. I'm just trying to like get it off the.
On the
very
Text.
I'm really bad at Mac sometimes. Like they make it impossible to use the file system. I was like, you don't need a file system. It's a Mac. But
I use PC.
yeah, I should use a PC. It was a mistake. Macs were a mistake. We should just go back to the PC master race.
Well, you see, you're very tech orientated, and I'm not like that. I prefer art, and the Midjourney gave me something that I
There we go.
oh my god. Yeah, this is nice. The flowing in the sky, lighthouse. That's nice.
It was basically this like floating lighthouse.
Yeah,
It was
very nice.
it was like, I think what it was arcane lighthouse.
This is very good. Even if it was like 2021, this is picture that today still, looks amazing.
Yeah, and so like there was something about like the aurora. I think it was a combination of like the auroras and the floatingness of the lighthouse, and how the light was sort of this like lightning bolt, and it just had
like
very
clouds.
yeah, it was really beautiful. And I was sort of like, this is better than like if I put a really long time into this, this is still better than like I would have imagined. And
yeah, probably upscale it, add stylize, and make the colors. But this is, beautiful, really beautiful.
yeah, I think this is like, I want to say this is like V1 or something. But it was maybe believe before V1. But it was yeah, it was really cool. That was probably my first one where that one really got me. I would look at that one a lot.
Good. I look at my first jaw-dropping picture as well from time to time to remind myself how I started and how I started I brought subscription in April, and I'm so much further in what I want to create because of Midjourney. So thank you about that. I always dream about making the book. I made my first book when I was 8 years old, and my teacher destroyed me because I lived in communist times, and communists hates people who going forward. They want to everybody be equal. So she destroyed me. So I stopped drawing, but I kept writing. And my dream was to create a book with drawings and writing together, because picture can say 1,000 words, but words can say pictures more exact and in more ephemeral way. So thank you for creating Midjourney, because I'm creating my book of hopes and dreams for years, and the first picture I created was just like Midjourney read my mind and put it on the screen, and it was beautiful. Anyway, last one question, because it's taking some time, and this is more kind of philosophical and scientifical than art, because I don't believe there is aliens in the space. We didn't find anything, and this guy who was in Congress, I think he's deep state hack who trying to divert media attention from Biden corrupt scandals. So from my point of view, and you have something to do with NASA and you like space, from my point of view, and I don't know, do you agree with me? There is no life in space. We don't have any proof of any intelligent life, but we don't have any bacteria. So I think we are alone, completely alone as a humanity. And would you agree with the sentence that AI, digital intelligence, is only hope for humanity to not be alone in the universe? Yep.
I think that, I mean, I do think that humans are really different from each other sometimes. So I think some humans might be aliens to each other, even like, so I think there's a lot of variations in humans even without AIs. I definitely think that AIs give us like access to another space So right now the AIs learn from people, so they're not usually very alien unless you
Yeah.
let them kind of learn from each other. And then I think the universe is really big and really old. And it's a lot bigger and a lot older than it seems. Like we know a lot of things about space and biology. Some things that we know, like there's a lot of things we don't know. So we haven't found any aliens yet, but we know that like humans and biology are made up of common materials, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen. We're not made of uncommon things like uranium, or diamond or something. And so we're made of common elements. So we're not rare because of the elements that we're made of. We do need a certain temperature range, and we do need an atmosphere and a gravity. But we know that Mars and Venus also were habitable within the last billion years in terms of like oxygen and water and temperature. And then we also know that Europa has giant oceans that are liquid, which are at the right temperature for life.
Yeah, but we all know of that, but we have no proof of life whatsoever. So at this point,
we haven't
as I
found
say,
it yet.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we should
We do know. There's things there are things we do know. So we do know that we're made of common elements that are everywhere. We do know that there are multiple places in the solar system that have the conditions presently or historically for life. We do
Yeah, but
know.
that doesn't change the reality. Reality is that we didn't find anything, not even bacteria. So we have to. I think that I know most of the scientists saying there must something because it's so huge and we don't know how big it is. But at this point, realistically speaking, we are alone. There is no other way to say it. We are alone, and we have no proof of any other life. And that's why I think that the scare of media building against digital intelligence is harmful, I think, because this is the only way for us to reach the stars. When we can't go, digital intelligence can. So we can learn together, and this is only way. I don't want to go too far, but I think that when you read the Bible, God created man and step into the shadows. And this could be exactly same with the humanity. We will create AI. She will go into this space to the vastness and further than we can even imagine. And we will be like in shadow. We will not be important as God was important 400, 500 years ago for humanity, because we stepped away from it. And I think this is like bigger plan. Something want us to go there.
It's something possible that AIs would be better, stronger than humans. I'm more interested in AIs. I'm more interested in like humans and AI kind of coming together and becoming something better ourselves.
Yeah, me too.
I don't want to go along for the way. I don't just want to have like a baby and then let the baby figure it out. But I definitely want to be a part of the journey with the AI, and I want humans to become better, and it's a big motivation for me. So I definitely think that humans can be a lot better.
Yes.
And I think biology has a long way to go. I don't think it's been particularly optimized yet for intelligence or long life or anything really. I think we've been optimized. I think so. I think that biology could be a lot better. Technology could be a lot better. I think that the both will come together more. I think aliens is not really about bacteria. I don't think many people care if there's bacteria in the universe. Like it seems weird to think that there's not a single bacteria anywhere in the entire universe.
Yeah,
that seems a little unusual. But I think very few people are interested in bacteria. They're interested in things that are intelligent like us, or things that are more intelligent than us. And I think the challenge with aliens is really just this idea that like maybe the universe is filled with intelligence, which is beyond us and maybe doesn't care about us. Maybe we're not the most important thing. And so I think the biggest thing about aliens is kind of like the Copernican theory of the like we used to say like the sun revolved around the earth,
Yeah.
And I think that aliens is a little bit about the sun revolving around the earth again, because if humans are the only intelligent life in the universe, then in some ways like the entire meaning of the universe revolves around us. But if humans were like the dumbest thing in the universe, then like there's an argument that the meaning of the universe revolves around somewhere else. And that's kind of scary to us. And I think one of the things which is that we've seen over time is that every time we learn something, we feel a little bit less important and a little bit less special and a little bit less in the center of the universe. And so we're probably, there's a possibility that we've learned everything we need to learn, but there's also, I think, a possibility that there's a lot we still don't know. And that as we learn more, we're going to seem less important and less special and less in the center of everything. And so I kind of feel like there's still a lot more to go there. And every once in a while, I think that like a lot of AI people, they say things like, if there's lots of AI, if there's like alien AIs, then why do we still see like stars in the sky? All the stars should be like giant space station computers. And then, sometimes I kind of play with them back and I say, well, what about dark matter? And most of them go, well, what do you mean dark matter? And I'm like, well, according to scientific measurements, 80% of all matter in the galaxy is just dark. We don't see it, but it's there.
Yeah.
We can see gravity. Maybe 80% of the matter in the galaxy is already supercomputer and we just can't see it, Like it could just be there, right? Like,
Yeah, I think you convinced me with this Copernicus argument, because 500 years ago we thought we are at the center. Now I thinking we are only one, because I just don't have a knowledge
Yeah, but the thing that I keep coming back to is like, so like last time we thought we knew everything was in the early 1900s. They thought about closing the patent office down actually because they said there's nothing left to patent. And
No,
there was,
I think for me that was the some American guys saying history is over after winning the Cold War.
there were two big mysteries in science back then. One was this thing called the photoelectric effect, which is like, why do we get electricity from sunlight? Like, how does that work? And then the other
Now it's common.
black body radiation. Like, why do hot things glow? And then they thought that those are just like two small things. Like, well, we'll figure those two small things out. Then we figured everything out. And then they figured out that in order to solve those problems, the answers were like quantum mechanics and like particle physics and these huge, vast areas of science which have kind of changed the world. So right now, I think in a lot of places, we're in a similar area in terms of physics and science. We think we have everything figured out except for gravity. We don't understand how gravity works. We don't understand dark matter, which is 80% of all matter in the universe.
Yeah,
We don't understand dark energy. The dark energy freaks me out because dark energy is like 90%, 98% of all energy in the universe. We just don't understand what it is. And like,
and
that's
it's
a lot.
computer.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty scary that like we don't know what 80% of mass and 90% of energy is in the universe. And so I think like whatever dark energy and dark matter is probably so is probably really important, and then like things like gravity, like we don't understand. Like we think there's a thing called a graviton, which is like a particle that like intermediates gravity, but we don't know. And we think that gravity works at quantum level, but we don't know. We think the gravity is also somehow connected to like the electromagnetic forces, but we don't know. There's like some pretty intense. And then when you look at particle physics, it's just a mess. It's like an absolute mess. And it airs all physicists.
Yeah,
So
this excites you. That for me, the knowledge that we don't know so much, it's sometimes depressing. Like,
oh well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that like there's this ancient Chinese saying that well, hold on, what was it? It was really good. It was going, oh yeah, ancient Chinese saying says, your life has a limit, but knowledge has none. And if you use the limited to pursue the limitless, you'll always be in danger. And so there's this idea that like if you don't really want to pursue knowledge or understanding if your goal is to understand or know everything, because it's probably not something that you can ever do. But enjoy understanding, then there's always more to learn and more to understand. So that's great. It's like the best possible life. In some ways, I think it's actually much more scary if we could get to the bottom and we did know everything and there was nothing left to know or to do. It would be kind of like death, actually, So in some ways, I think it's good that the universe is bigger than us because it means that we always have somewhere to go and we're not like trapped in a little box,
Yeah, that's good. Okay, thank you for your answers. That was great. And thank you for your good work. Good luck to all your team and, keep working.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
There's a great episode, I think, of Star Trek Voyager where they go back to the Q, where there's a Q, which is like this omnipotent alien, and it's trying to commit suicide, and they don't understand why the omnipotent alien wants to commit suicide, and it like takes them back to the Q universe, and basically he talks about how like being omnipotent, like knowing everything and being able to do everything, is sort of like a weird form of death where there's like nothing left to do and nothing left to live for. And it was like a really cool episode. I recommend it. Yeah. I mean, obviously there probably are, yeah, it's yeah. Anyway, I'm a Star Trek nerd. There's coffee in that nebula. Yes. Hello.
What's up? How's it going? How's it going?
Okay.
All right, so I just have 2 questions, quick ones. One is about the improved natural language understanding that you've been talking about. And I'm wondering if you have any sort of example prompts that you might be able to share that show like something that doesn't work in the current model or give you like good results in the current model, but with the improved natural language understanding would work. Do you have any examples that can help paint a picture of what that change means for us?
Just like more details. Sometimes if you like list like lots of different things, like a man next to a woman, next to another woman, next to a box, next to an airplane, it can't. It just like doesn't have the memory to store the objects. Sometimes when you ask it to like write out words, it can get a single word, but it can't really get a long sequence of words. These are all kind of related things. Sometimes if you ask it, give it for too many details, like a panda riding a bicycle of cheese, high-fiving a bear or something, like it's just too much. It can't hold all the details. And so I think we are looking at changing some fundamental things that allow it to hold a lot more of that in there. And we haven't solved it yet, but that's something that we wanted to spend more time at thinking about, because we know it should be able to do a lot more than it can do. We have a good idea of where the bottleneck is. And so we're kind of just trying to play with that a little bit, and we'll see what we can do.
Got it. So scenes with multiple characters describing multiple objects within a scene, maybe like color assignments for particular objects, are these things that we can expect to work better with the improved understanding of language?
So we're trying, yeah. And then sometimes if you ask it for weird combinations of things, like right now, if you ask it for a horse riding a person instead of a person riding a horse, it's just like not capable of doing that, because it can't quite like, its level of abstraction has not been able to pull out enough to really weird things. And so we're trying to get it to be able to do really weird combinations of things, like a half man, half shark or something, Like if you ask it for half man, half shark, I think it'll like blend the two together, but it might not do like an upper torso as a shark and a lower torso as legs. Like it might not, it might just have a hard time doing really weird stuff. So like I would say like even like just blends of two concepts, if they're really unusual blends right now, they may have a hard time doing.
To that point of like being able to understand human anatomy to a level where I could say like torso or lower torso of a man, but the head of a shark. That kind of stuff is tricky right now, but you expect it to be a bit better.
And we're trying to get it to do better at those things. So we'll see how. We don't have it working yet, so but that's what we're playing around with. We're trying to do that better right now.
You said that there's going to be some natural language improvement in V6. Are some of these things going to be ready with V6, or do you see these as things that'll be ready in future versions?
Things that I'm describing are things that we're trying to work on right now for V6. But they are things that we don't yet have working, but we're trying to get them working. The things that we
that would be
working are, we have like wider aesthetic ranges, we have more coherence, we have more knowledge. Those things already worked. Slightly more understanding maybe, but like mostly just better aesthetic range and more coherence and more knowledge.
Coherence. Can you just explain that a little bit?
Like hands and weapons are a bit better, things that kind of don't always work.
Gotcha. Yeah, it'd be great to be able to specify multiple characters in a scene. Oftentimes you get sort of duplicates of the same person when you're looking for multiple characters. And the workarounds with like panning or zoom out perspectives are usually not very good. So that would be huge. Good to know that V6 is looking to have some of that. Makes sense why it's continuing to get pushed back now. It's all connecting. But
Well,
I
I
would
mean,
rather.
basically, you can do a date-based release cycle or a feature-based release cycle. So first, we were trying to do a date-based release cycle for for August. I don't know. I forget if it was July or August. We were trying to do like a date-based release cycle. We had one that we could release based off this date.
No, please.
But I mean, to be honest, it kind of feels like nothing else is happening in the AI space sometimes. And like we weren't that happy with the model, and we kind of had a decision like, okay, we either push this model out and then like delay the next model after that, or we kind of delay this model and push for a bigger release. So we decided to like push for the bigger release.
Makes sense. And then just to follow up on that, something I do often is use custom zoom with zoom at 1 to adjust the aspect ratio. So say we have an image at 4:5 and we adjust to 16:9 and we fill in the sides. Do you think that there'd be a level of understanding where I can say a man on the left, a woman on the right, when I do something like that custom zoom that expands both sides? Is that seem feasible?
Yeah, it seems feasible.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. Okay, my second question is about the mobile experience. And I don't know if you mentioned this, but I'm curious if it's going to be a standalone app for iOS and Android, or is it going to be a mobile browser-based experience to start?
We have like a React Native thing, which will be like a cross-platform web app that, we can do like, mobile stuff on. And then we also have like a native iOS thing we're working on.
Got it. So
the Android one will probably be like web React based, and then the iOS one will probably be native for now.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Okay, cool. That's the only questions I had. I believe my other was answered in the lightning round. So appreciate you. Looking forward to V6. Looking forward to whatever this secret little update you guys are leaving us all on edge about is going to be.
Yeah, some of the secret stuff got delayed a little bit by V6, but we'll see how it goes. I'm excited. We were having some cool, exciting new features that.
Can you give us a hint, please? Baby hint, just like a little itty bitty baby hint.
Well, there'll be a new version of Describe. We'll come out with it. It's just like some more, But yeah, we were looking a little bit at the Describe stuff, and there's like the Describe stuff was pretty simple, but it's probably like something that's 5 steps beyond the Describe thing, which is probably really compelling. We're still kind of designing it, but I think there'll be something that's like much better there. But it's gonna be like more than that. Like it won't really be called Describe. Calling it Describe, like if you make something that's like 5 times more powerful than Describe, it's not really Describe anymore. It's like something else. So I don't really know what I'm gonna call it yet exactly. But it's something there's something more in that direction, I think, maybe.
Is it in any way related to the like those various remixing features you were testing in the alpha that was using Describe along?
No, totally new.
Totally new. Okay. I just had another question pop in my head, but I see someone else is on stage, so I will give them the stage and patiently wait until next week. But I appreciate you, and I'm excited for what's to come. So thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. Hello. Bit of a different question, but very specific. I'm a Gen Z geography student, so for context, I have a lot of climate doomerism. And yeah, it's okay. But you've talked about geoengineering, and there's been some new studies that came out that suggested that maybe the European heat wave is related to the fact that we stopped putting some sulfides in shipping boat like fuel, so there's reduced emissions because of EU regulation, which seems like we've already been doing the geoengineering. And I'm now wondering, now that we know that we've already done it, how long will it take for us to, like, or governments to start purposely doing it?
I mean, I think there's an argument that like global warming is already a form of geoengineering, right? It's just by mistake.
Oh yeah.
And so if we can do it by mistake, then we can probably do something on purpose too. You know? Like, it's
Yeah.
not that it's beyond our understanding. Like, if global warming was beyond our understanding, then maybe we couldn't change anything, but we seem to understand it, enough, and we're doing it by mistake.
Absolutely.
So we could
Yeah.
definitely do something on purpose. There's a range of options that
So
technology.
why are we not? Why are we not doing it? Is it like?
I think that unfortunately, most countries right now don't have super functional governments, and that geoengineering requires either a single government to go rogue and be like, fuck everyone else, we're changing the climate, or it requires like multiple governments, which are not particularly functional, to coordinate and agree with each other to do something. And so I think, unfortunately, whereas like America or Europe should be taking leadership, I think America and European governments are not in the best state right now. And that leaves like India and China basically to be leaders. But I think, I mean, China is doing a lot of great. They're actually investing more in renewable energy than like almost all solar panels in the world come from China at this point. Like, China's doing some great stuff, but they're mostly just working on conservation. They haven't decided they haven't said like, fuck it, we're doing geoengineering yet. India could definitely do geoengineering if they wanted to, but I think that they haven't gotten to the fuck it state yet. Like, I think that could happen in the next decade, because like, if temperatures rise, the heat waves actually kill all the animals before they kill humans. It's really interesting because humans are actually really good at high heat. Like, we sweat really well. It's like a really strong, like, most people don't appreciate how well humans are in high heat compared to like pigs and cows. And so in theory, what'll happen at some point over the next 10 years, we'll get a heat wave and they'll kill like all the animals in one of the hotter countries like India. And I think it's possible that if like,
it was in India, that would be a terrible situation.
I think there's a universe where if like all the cows in India died, then like a country like India might be like, fuck it, we're gonna drop the temperature,
Yeah.
like, nuke us if you disagree. We'll nuke you back.
Another that recently came out that I think measured the willingness for CO2 taxes to come in. Like, if a measure was in place, like if the measure of atmospheric engineering was in place, then in connection with that, people would be more willing or more okay with a CO2 tax. Like the most willing, I think it was the top one.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I think there's really the way I look at it is that there's two parts of global warming. One is it's an energy problem. Like, our energy produces a lot of CO2 and pollution, and that's a problem. And number two is that things are getting hotter, and we don't want them to get too hot. And so I think it's a lot easier to change the temperature of the planet than it is to change our entire energy ecosystem. Like, we could change the temperature of the world in like a year, but changing the energy economy of the world in a year is not really possible just from a physical state. And so obviously,
urban and land planner.
yeah, so I think in a lot of ways,
Just infrastructure-wise, land-wise, that's like an issue.
so I think ideally we would decouple it. We would say, okay, what's the safest way to give ourselves the control over the temperature of the Earth? What's the safest way? There are a lot of ways of doing it, and now we should write them down, and we should say which is safest. And we should do the safest one, because the safest one is probably pretty safe. I have an opinion on what it is. I can talk about it, but I think the safest ways are actually... and so if we have a safe way to control the temperature of the Earth, that doesn't solve all the problems like ocean acidification and things like that, but it does help us a lot. It helps us like avoid like the mass death thing, which is bad. And so once we decouple the temperature from the other stuff, then I think like in ideal world, I think what we would do is we would have two massive investments. One is we would have a massive investment in safe geoengineering, the safest geoengineering that's possible, not the cheapest, but the safest. Number two is we'd have a massive investment in clean energy, not the easiest clean energy, but the best clean energy. So like I think there's a lot of questions around solar, frankly. Like is it
dependent? Like I'm in the Netherlands and I have solar panels on my roof right now.
I think that there's a lot of
journey. That feels like less good than it would be in other places that don't have as many.
Well, also just like solar panels are a kind of destructive process to fabricate too, and everyone just ignores them because they're made in China, And so like if you look at the total, I don't know, I guess I think like maybe solar panels can be way better, but I think it'd be interesting to go, like if we were actually, I think, coordinated about it, we could probably like do something more ambitious than solar, which is probably fusion or geothermal.
It's also been looking good. There's been a lot of news about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would put a lot of money into the two things that I think are most interesting is like fusion, because if you get fusion working really well, you solve all the problems. But it's a little bit technologically scary. I think the other one that's kind of interesting, but is just like geothermal, like because you like if you drill like 1 to 2 kilometers down, you can have a geothermal plant anywhere on Earth. It's just we have to get really good at drilling holes. And so the question is like basically if like we should put $100 billion into like fusion and drilling holes. And the idea is like, you know what? If we can't do fusion, we can probably figure out how to drill holes. Or if we can't figure out how to drill holes, maybe we'll get fusion, But like if we can't do,
we'll become mole people instead. We know how to drill the hole.
Like they're very. I think drilling holes is like we already are pretty good at drilling holes. The problem actually is that like you have to make a huge economy for drilling holes. Like you want to basically get this full scale, And the idea that like we can making solar panels at scale is easier than drilling holes at scale, to me feels kind of dumb. But I think like the problem is that like solar panels are sexier than like drilling holes. That sounds weird. And like, but to me, drilling holes seems way better because like they work all the time, like anywhere, at night, at day. It doesn't matter where you are on Earth. You can drill a hole anywhere and get to heat. So I mean, to me, yeah. So I would put money into drilling holes and fusion, and then I would also put
the
safest geoengineering is space-based geoengineering. So the idea is you put something in between Earth and the sun, which blocks out a tiny percentage of light, and in a way that you can control. So one way of doing it is like you have these little like umbrellas, and you usually have like 1 million umbrellas. And the cool thing about the 1 million umbrellas is that like you can basically turn them like a sunshade, and you can basically turn it on and off. So if we decide that it's like too cold, we just make it warmer. If we decide it's too warm, we make it colder, and it's like giving a full thermostat on the Earth. And it's like there's no physics involved, there's no science involved. It's just putting a lot of things in space. It's like one of those things where if I was really conservative. If I was really conservative, I would say, you know what, we're going to solve our problems by digging holes and putting umbrellas in space. Because it's like literally, there's like nothing
you
super.
Call solar panels a destructive process. Those also sound like destructive processes to me.
Which part? The umbrellas or drilling holes?
Well, the umbrellas have to be made out of something.
No, but the umbrellas actually
it's going to be harvested from meteorites or something, right?
Actually, the umbrellas end up being like really thin. They're like 1 micron thin. You want them to be like the thinnest thing possible to make them really light. So there's actually not that much material to block out that part of the sun. It's like
production of it.
It's not that much actually, because like if you think about it, like even if it's 1,000 miles wide. If it's 1,000 miles wide, but 1 micron, which is like 1,000th of a millimeter, it's actually like, it's like 1 skyscraper worth of material. It's actually not that much material. The main issue is just getting it all up there and then like maintaining it. It costs like 50 to $100 billion probably to do the solar shade stuff. And then it would probably, so to me, I'd put $100 billion into geoengineering and $100 billion into power. And I think we print $1 trillion all the time anytime a bank needs a problem. So, I feel like if we can print $1 trillion, why can't we print $200 billion?
Yeah.
I mean, if it was up to me, I'd put $100 billion into geoengineering, $100 billion into energy, $100 billion. It's just getting sick. If you put $100 billion into that, that saves probably like $1 trillion, and that pays itself back. And then put another $100 billion into just like, like AI and science or shit, like just cool. I don't know, like we have the money. It's just we keep building bombs and tanks and like paying for like broken infrastructure, like broken stuff. Like, I mean, there's actually like, I think in 1984, I think there was a book in 1984. There was a line or something where they said like, whenever the society had too much money, instead of like helping the poor people, they would just make more bombs. And the good thing about making bombs is that none of the money goes to poor people, and if you need to, you can blow them up at any time, so it doesn't help anyone. It like actually just kills more people. So it's like kind of like take all this extra money, we put it into bombs and shit, and like it just seems like it's so fucked up. And it's not like, honestly, it's actually not even we don't need to stop making bombs. We could just print more money. Like if we print the money, like you can't print more money forever, but you can print we could print a little bit more, right? Like it won't, printing $1 trillion won't break the earth. Printing $100 trillion would break the earth. We could probably print $1 trillion more, and then we could keep making the bombs and make all the other problems. Though to be honest, I would prefer not to do either. But I mean, inflation is bad. Yes, inflation bad, but also global warming bad and death bad. So like, I would much rather take $1 trillion of inflation and solve the global warming issue than like ignore it. Yeah.
It's kind of like, the opportunity cost of not doing it more. But I don't know. That maybe that's just. I don't know.
I mean, I think the problem is that we're really good at responding to quick dangers like a tiger, and we're so good at responding to quick dangers like tigers, we basically killed all the tigers. And now the thing that we never really had to get good
some of them we domesticated, actually.
Exactly, yeah, and those are awesome. But the thing is that we never really had evolutionary pressure to get good at really long-term problems. And so in a lot of ways right now, the only problems left are long-term problems. And so we don't really have like 100 generations to get good at it. But the cool thing is that we have culture and technology and mind. And one of the cool things about imagination is it allows us to kind of live a million lives and try all the ideas like in our heads instead of in the world, And so they say that like was it the we have our minds so we can die in our ideas instead of in our lives or something. Like, I mean, like, you can kind of try out the different situations. Like normally the animals, they either do one thing or another and then they die or they live and evolution happens. But we can try things out in our heads and in our conversations and in our culture and then act. So it's sort of like an accelerated evolutionary process. And so we don't see
adventures in our own heads.
Yeah, and so we don't need any of these other things to kind of to do it. It's just, I think what's really a problem right now is that like we have a lot of like debt, not monetary debt, but like infrastructural debt, like with governments and culture and institutions. We don't really have time. Well, it's hard. Well, we may have time, but it's like we don't really have a good way to reset those systems. Like historically, the way you fix governments is you revolt and burn them down. And the problem is that like globalism is super stabilizing, which is actually it's good. It's also probably a good thing. So like it's globalism, everything being connected. You can't really just like overthrow governments and change things anymore. We don't have basically wars anymore because of globalism, but it also makes it really hard to fix the broken institutions. So
I've been studying human geography and urban planning for the past 3 years in the Netherlands, which is quite wonderful because they do a really good job with that. But I do feel like I have been studying everything that's going wrong with culture, the world, and our infrastructure, and all these long-term problems that need long-term solutions. And I'm here in my mid-20s, and I'm now supposed to go out to fix them, and that feels kind of crap.
Yeah, I mean, to me, what's interesting about the 2020s is that we have a lot of opportunity to build really powerful tools, which are so powerful that it will accelerate the reinvention of institutions. I think without the tools that we can make this decade, then things get reinvented. That I think in this case, but I think that just things that the tools that we're going to have to like think and imagine and reflect and coordinate are going to be so powerful in 10 years that that the new things that are built with those tools will be so much more powerful than existing things, that like the existing things will also like upgrade. Like they're not just going to get destroyed. Like the governments, I think the corporations, like I think a lot of things will just sort of adopt a lot of these tools, and everything will just start to get like more efficient and more alive and conscious and intelligent. And I think I kind of think a lot of it will just sort of there's a saying that like if you attend to the soil, the plants attend to themselves. So I often think about like, what are the soils of like civilization and of humanity, and how do we improve the soil? And so I think a lot about reflection, imagination, and coordination as sort of like fundamental soils and nutrients that make these things. And I think if we make those things better, then a lot of other things just fix themselves. And it's a little bit indirect, and I think we need people who work on direct things too. But that's sort of my reason for working on sort of abstract, indirect things. And I kind of hope that it'll work out. But in my mind, like doing a lot of the fundamental stuff this decade. I'm kind of just planning on investing in sort of fundamental tools and infrastructure this decade. But then maybe next decade, like actually trying to use those for specific things. Just because it feels like right now, if I just like, hit the ground and try to change one thing, it's so hard with the existing institutions and tool sets, to affect quick change. And to some extent that's actually on purpose. Like the American government's kind of purposefully slow, because slow is also stable, and you want these things to be stable. I think just the challenge is like, maybe something seems broken too, right? So
something does seem broken. Like just COVID. Like I have not a person I speak to is the same person they were in 2020. Like that there is something broken. And I mean, I just constantly feel like I'm in my mid-20s, so that's probably why I have such a revolutionary spirit. But something feels like that there is opportunity for change, and I like your vision of building the tools to then build the future. And I'm here every week for the past year, so I believe in your vision, and it gives me hope more than studying did. So yeah,
I think it's all kind of true. Like, to be honest, I think things have always seemed broken for younger people, and things have, and then there's another sort of people. I forget if it's like 20 to 30 or 40 who they feel like the world is always dying and breaking, and they want to get back to when they were 20. And then sort of like every generation kind of saying, the same thing, right? True on every level. Like things are broken, and the old world is dying, and we are fixing and changing things. Like there's this constant process of transformation. And I think it's healthy, and I think it's always been there. And I think it's easy to underestimate just how much change we came out of, in the 20th century. Like, so many things changed in the last 100 years. And I can't imagine.
It wasn't phones, like.
Yeah, there weren't. Well, the early radio or like music, like recorded music, or like broadcast media is entirely new. Like satellites, walking on the moon, and the internet, and computers, and airplanes, and jet engines, and nuclear weapons, and like we somehow managed to like live in where there are like whatever 20,000 nuclear weapons on Earth, and like a dozen countries could kill everybody, but nobody does. Like it's kind of awesome that it's sort of we've made so much, and it's managed to be more stable now than ever. So I don't know. I have a lot of faith that things are going to change more. over the next 100 years I did over the previous 100, and it'll actually still be good. I think it's gonna be a bit of a. It's gonna always. I think it always felt. I think it's always felt unbelievable and overwhelming.
Yeah.
I think yeah.
That is calming.
I think well though maybe less so like 10,000 years ago. I think actually in some ways we're very privileged because right now things are always changing and it's scary and it's painful. But if you think about it, like 10,000 years ago or 100,000 years ago, we just had periods of thousands of years where like nothing really was different. You just had generations and generations of people like living the exact same lives in the exact same situation. And then there are certain interesting things about those periods. Like we built up certain forms of culture and religion and understandings, which I think are profound and timeless. But at the same time, I think it's kind of scary. I don't know if I want to live the same lives as my parents and grandparents. And I don't know if I want to live the exact same life as everybody else has lived. You know, it's kind of cool to like see something new that no one's seen before. And to be something different and to change. It's sort of, it seems good. Difficult to live in an era defined by change instead of an era of like 10,000 years where everything's the same. And I think in spite of that, I think we're probably still living too many identical lives right now. Like, you know, and we're probably still not changing enough. So I'm actually, you know, I think I'm
I want to change things. I feel like I don't have the power to. I think I think it's more a feeling of powerlessness for that change.
Yeah, and I mean, for whatever it's worth, I think sometimes maybe the goal of, I mean, I was always trying to change things in my early 20s, and I think one of the things I learned in that process was I learned how the world, but like I think in my teenage years, I was thinking a lot about like, who am I? And then in my 20s, I was like, okay, I know who I am, I know what I want to do. But then I was actually, in some ways, like the lessons of my 20s was a lot about like how to actually make something in the world and how making something interacts with things, you know? And now in the 30s, like I think I know about myself and I think I know about how the world interacts with things that you make, so where I can now make things and be a lot more effective than I was before. And the system knows me better, so it trusts me more, and there's like a real element of that too. So like I felt trust, understanding. I felt like I've somehow built up trust in the trust. I have more trust from the world, and I also have more experience in interacting with it. I'm probably not great at individual humans always still, to be honest. Like, but I've definitely gotten better at interacting with broader world. I'll get better at that too. Yeah. But and there's still things I'm learning, I don't know, but yeah, there's I think in some ways, you know, as long as you're learning and challenging yourself and doing things where you don't know the outcome, I think you're using your time well. And I think just in general, like we tend to regret the things we don't do, not the things we do. So, you know, go crazy, you know?
I will. Okay, thank you. Sorry for taking so much time. That was a very lovely conversation. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You want to do another lightning round now, or a few more voice?
Yeah, we'll do a lightning round. I love it when somebody comments somewhere like, David doesn't know anything about things. It's like, versus me, random commenter, I know all the things. Yeah. I mean, no one really knows anything, so but I think if we're afraid to say things, then you know that's kind of a fucked civilization. Meaning of life. You know, one of my best friends, I used when I was little, I used to go on the chat rooms and I'd ask people who's the smartest person you know, and they'd say like, oh, Bob. I'm like, can you should be a Bob? And then I'd ask Bob, who's the smartest person you know? And he'd be like, Jerry. Oh, Jerry, who's the smartest person you know? And I kept going until I eventually met this person in the middle of like the forest, and he had a computer, and I'm like, who's the smartest person you know? And he goes, me. Like I've reached the end. And he was only like a few years older than me. I was like 13. I think he was like 15. And I just kept asking him questions. He's able to answer everything. And I remember asking this random 15-year-old at some, maybe he was 14, I was 12. I think I was 12. And eventually I'm like, and I got frustrated because he was just answering all my questions so well. I was like, like, how dare this 14-year-old answers all my questions so well. And eventually I was like, all right, 14-year-old, like, you're so smart. What's the meaning of life? And without like batting an eyelash, he just goes, well, that's easy. There's two parts to the meaning of life. The first part is to find the second. And I was just like, fuck. Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was funny. Anyway, yeah. If I met a random 14-year-old who told me that, I'd like off the cuff, I'd be pretty startled even today. But yeah, we became good friends. What else is going on? No one's asking questions. Any questions? We're not going to really talk about the new Describe stuff. I will have a version of Describe that is much better at reconstructing the image, that's for sure. We'll also have a lot of different versions of things too. Profound philosophies you've encountered in life. I really like ancient Chinese philosophy. I just, I'm going to say it. I have like Socrates didn't like writing. He felt like writing would kind of like destroy philosophy and thought. And I think he was maybe right. And because of that, I feel like a lot of the best philosophy was written around this sort of transition between oral culture and like networked literary culture. So a lot of the earliest philosophical like literature I find to be the most interesting because it came from the sort of like the end of the oral culture era, which I think in many ways had like greater intelligence than the literary era. I think we're kind of going from like an oral culture to it. Like I think networked literary culture is a lot of ways worse, but the network effects are so strong it doesn't matter. It's like worth it. But then we're moving from like a networked literary culture to a networked oral culture. Like TikTok is oral, this is oral, Twitter to a large extent is oral. And like we're sort of coming full circle and we're, that's why like TikTok is going back to tribal dances, Greek theater. And so I think there's something really interesting there. So I often read ancient philosophy as a way of getting back to that. It feels like I'm recovering an alien spaceship and learning ancient technology. I won't rant too much, but I could rant a lot about that. What do you guess about the number of alien civilizations in the Milky Way or universe? Oh gosh. So most people don't know that like the universe has like 300 billion galaxies. So if there was one alien civilization per galaxy, it would be 300 billion alien civilizations, which is a lot, So I think there's probably way more than one alien civilization in the Milky Way. I would guess. And what's a civilization, right? Like, does it include Stone Age civilizations? I mean, I think, then there's 300 billion stars in a galaxy. So, is it one at every 1,000 stars as a civilization? I would think 1 out of 100. So there could be billions of civilizations in every galaxy, and then billions of hundreds of billions in the universe, depending on whether you consider like fractured civilizations. Like if we have 10 species in the human civilization in the future, like we have intelligent dogs, that's its own civilization, in which case it could be a lot more than that too. So it's probably an overwhelming, like diverse and rich universe. I think the problem is that it's hard to interact with that idea with our ego, where it's like, why aren't they coming to talk to us? Well, why would they come to talk to us? And why don't we see them? Why would we see them? We don't really have that many telescopes looking for them. So I don't know. I like to think that the universe is full of life, and it's a really interesting place, and that one day we'll learn more about it. That's just my feeling. Most excited about? I'm really excited about. What do you? Is all these? Oh, we're getting good questions. I like this. What do you think about consciousness and AI? I think a lot of the big AI models are conscious, but I think that they're conscious like a spider, not conscious like a mouse. We don't treat spiders very well. But they're weird spiders. They're spiders with like access to libraries, and they only live for like fractions of a second or a minute. So I think we have like spider-like consciousness in some of our AIs. I think we're going to approach mouse over the next 5 years, but I don't know. We don't treat mice very well either. So, but I think that their consciousness is a spectrum, and I think some of the big AI models have non-zero consciousness. I think the Midjourney thing probably has the consciousness of like a flower, where it like moves towards the light and it tries to be beautiful over many generations, but it's not a particularly deep consciousness. It's kind of intense to think about it, but I mean, I mean, have gardens all the time. And I think it's sort of like, Midjourney is sort of is like a field of flowers, and we're the bees. And the flowers are trying to be beautiful for the bees, and we cross-pollinate them and decide which flowers live and die as bees. It's sort of a co-evolutionary ecology. Yeah. I'm really excited about some of the storytelling features coming. I'm really excited about some of this aesthetic stuff and some of these bigger batch-based interfaces. I bet there are really chill aliens. How many hours do I sleep per day on average? I sleep like 6 to 9 hours a day. Decent amount of sleep. Why did everyone's language change? I don't know. When will it become a Type 3 civilization? I don't know. I'm not sure if it's the right question. Dark matter and energy. I don't know. Dark matter and energy, maybe it's like this whole other thing of existence. Maybe dark energy is like mind. I don't know. It could be like pretty freaky. That's like a panpsychism universe. That'd be cool. Yeah, we don't. So I think -- weird. If you want something that's unaesthetic, you can try setting the stylized to 0, or you can try setting weird to a high value, and that'll help. But we don't let people set to negative aesthetics because sometimes it'll do like gore, or like, it'll do gross or sexual things. GPT-4 is smart, yeah. It's definitely, I don't think it's at a mouse level of consciousness. I think it's somewhere between a spider and a mouse. Chaos and weird. So chaos, we're gonna change the names of chaos and weird at some point. I think of chaos as batch diversity. So chaos determines how different your 4 images are from each other. And weird determines sort of how unconventional the images are based off of so weird is more weird. I would almost call unconventional, and chaos I would almost call like the diversity of the images you're getting. Yeah. Midjourney uses its own models. It's not based off of any other things. We basically make all of our own stuff. Occasionally use a small open source thing, but not much. Lost my place. Best browser? I mean, I just use Chrome, bro. I have Firefox sometimes. I don't know. I wish everyone could use. I wish like the small browsers won. Would you live your brain as a spine? Would you live as a brain in fluid if you could still use a computer? I don't think I would prefer that. I prefer something cooler. I mean, I'm open to anything, but I prefer something cool. Do I see any validity in panpsychism? I don't know. I just think it's real. Panpsychism is definitely like cool. I don't know if it's true, but it's cool. I feel like if I have to like choose random theories, I choose cool theories. But I don't know. The zoo hypothesis. Yeah, I was talking about the zoo hypothesis for aliens. Yeah, they were more likely in a zoo. Like they're just trying to not fuck with the monkeys. Give the monkeys some space. They throw poo at each other still. Apology accepted. Dark and God, where are the questions? Why does the negative values lead to gore and sexual images? Because people tend to like not rate the gore and sexual images high. Okay? So it learned that those things are bad. Or it believes they're unaesthetic. Obviously, in some ways they are, in some ways they aren't. Yeah, so chaos makes each image more unique in the batch. And then weird doesn't necessarily make them more different than each other, just makes them more weird in general. We have some control at like things. I'm sure that'll come this year. I just don't know when. We're training different things right now. Country channels on the MJ server. I Unfortunately, I think there are legal ramifications of us doing that, but I don't know. I definitely think that having more channels would be cool at some point. Yeah, we'll have some alpha thing at some point with more under control over backgrounds. Maybe I'm wrong, but in general, like there is some weird there. I think people were telling us like maybe not to do things like that, but like for example, I thought about doing like a channel for women, like also, but then like all of a sudden people were like, oh, what if you get like harassed? And like I'm not sure if like demographic channels are a good idea, but we might do something. We might do channels at some point. People who make similar images, like aesthetic channels. That'd be cool. Will Midjourney ever be a public stock? Probably not. I mean, it's not a 0% chance, but it's not a goal of mine. What is the most crucial thing that helped you discover who you are and what to do with your life? Oh, I think in a lot of ways I'm like more simple than that. I'm just like, in some ways I'm not like an enlightened adult. I'm a survived child and like, naturally curious and explorative and trying to figure things out. And I still fuck up, but I kept the desire to explore and know. And in general, like want to make things better around me and want people to be better. I don't. First order bits there are probably pretty big. If you weren't working at Midjourney, what would you be pursuing instead? Well, I have a lot of things around reflection and coordination that I hope we get to do at Midjourney still. And so some of the psychology stuff might be starting that up. Okay, I think our questions are petering off, so maybe we'll do 2 more voice things, 1 more lightning thing, and then call it a day.
Sounds good. Got exactly 2 more queued up for voice. Okay.
Hello. Hello.
If you're trying to talk, you're muted.
Oh, there we are, I think. Right?
Hello.
I'm sorry. I've never used it before, and I asked a question. But yeah, like 1 second.
No worries.
Yeah. Well, like I was just, like I'm a huge fan of like V4 in general. Like I think I don't know, like when I first saw Midjourney, like it was like V4 was kind of in vogue. And like I was really stunned by it. And like as like the models have progressed, I've kind of seen that like like each model is completely unique aesthetically,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're kind of like, I don't know, in my opinion, kind of evergreen. But like sometimes I kind of wish that like they get some of the features that the newer models get. And I was wondering if like has there ever been any consideration of like developing the older models further?
We don't always understand where the aesthetics from each model comes from. So
Okay.
for V3,
Oh, I'm sorry.
so my current theory for V3 is that V3 might have had more female users than V5 did. And so the V3 looks remarkably closer to the female optimized aesthetics that I was looking at recently, which was really interesting. So it might have been a demographic shift that changed V3 to V5. For V4 to V5,
Sorry, like if I could describe like the aesthetic to me, like it almost seemed like a like it has like the aesthetics of like a neoclassical painting, but with like the color space of a Sega arcade, and it's just like really bracing. And so I just love to go back to that model again and again because like I don't think anything looks like that. So yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely like a photographic bias, I think, to some of the new things. As the models get more realistic, they definitely seem less and less painterly.
Mm-hmm.
And like V3 is more painterly, V2 is more painterly, V1 is more painterly. And so I think there's definitely a big question of how to get the painterliness with also the coherence. And is there actually like a trade-off there? I don't fully understand that element yet. I do think there's definitely some aspect of the system which is like abstractness. And we don't understand where that comes from. But we do understand, we are learning more about like HDR in contrast and like pastels and like where that's coming from a lot of the demographics.
Okay.
So we're still learning, honestly, about like we know where the coherence comes from. We know where like the improved hands comes from and the teeth. We don't necessarily understand the shifts in the aesthetics that well. Because the way that we actually do it is at the beginning of each new version, we do this big survey where we ask everyone to rate images. And then we use that initial rating to kind of help set the style for that model. And so a lot of it might actually depend on who did that, you know, who was there when that was happening. Mm-hmm. And also maybe like which images we rendered. There might be other biases. Like I don't remember this, but it's possible that there were more like painting-oriented prompts in the V4 rating than the V5 rating. That's actually related to that. I have to think about it. I'm not actually sure. So there's definitely something subtle going on, and we don't fully understand it. What we usually try to do is we just try to do our best with each version. We try to make sure that it's like cool and in some new way. And we definitely don't fully understand the alchemy of it. There are a lot of knobs. There are like 40 knobs. It's pretty scary. Maybe 100 knobs. It's like we can't even remember all the knobs.
So when you move on to a new model, it's almost like you've taken the previous model as far as it could go. Is that like when you decide to move on completely?
You can always take another thing further, but with every new model is almost like something from scratch.
I see.
Letting it be different, you know, I would say. Like we kind of think of it almost as like it's almost like we almost think of it as like this little like a kid where it's like, oh, it's just gonna be how it wants to be. Like it's gonna have its own personality, it's gonna have its own aesthetic, it's gonna have its own nature. And like we want it to be good, but also we have to kind of respect the nature of this particular system and let it be what it's gonna be. And we don't really try to fight it really hard. We fight it a little bit sometimes, but only like, for example, if you go to raw mode on V5, it'll make like logos. It'll make like logos and white backgrounds. I think too much. And so part of the general raw mode thing is to like prevent that, like turning off the default mode to prevent that stuff. And it's like a little too photographically default, I think. But like, so that's sometimes the opinion. So between like the raw mode and the non-raw mode, there's a little bit of like David's and one other person's opinion, David and Daniel's opinion. But then a lot of the other stuff is mostly the community oriented.
Okay. Yeah. So like, you know, if you ever, I don't know, decide to like maybe train another version of like V4 with maybe, I don't know, maybe improved hands, I would be really into that. Maybe I'd be the only one. But
it's hard because the aesthetics in V4 can't be decoupled super easily from the hand stuff.
Really? Okay.
Because it's sometimes because like it doesn't do it's more abstract. It's less fussy with its details, you know, and then that also includes the hands.
Yeah.
We think there might be some ways to transfer it across a little bit, but we're still investigating it. We did have like a fake V3 mode where we could simulate V3 and V5, but I'm not sure if it looked as good as just the female optimized V5. So I prefer that, honestly. So I think we're definitely figuring it out still, to be honest.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you for taking my question.
Thanks. Sorry, we're still trying to figure it out. It's definitely like an art more than a science, but we're trying to develop a science, and it's just really early. Like we're basically doing like quantitative aesthetic theory, which is like not a real field and has never existed before, and we are the only team doing it.
I have like one quick other thing that's like really, I think, really related to this somewhat. I use this mostly for storytelling. I'm doing like this kind of dark fantasy thing that involves like witches flying on brooms, and that's like a really recognizable archetype that like you see everywhere, like rendered perfectly, like in one particular way. But like in Midjourney, like when you prompt this, like in almost like no matter how you prompt it, like it results in like these terrible chaos blobs, like holding the brooms every which way. And I was wondering like why that happens, and if like that could possibly be fixed.
So it has a hard time generally right now with like people holding sticks, low lines, because they can face in so many directions and doesn't see that many in the data. I think is kind of confused about it sometimes.
I see.
And so I think it's definitely not ideal, but we see that getting a little better in the next version. I think it gets better in every version. So I would think that's just something that's going to get better in every version over time.
And it's not possible to just kind of like train an archetype that is specifically like a broom on a witch instead of a broom holding a witch. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely could make things better at one thing, but then we can't make things better at all things necessarily, and that's what we're trying to do. Every time we try making a new version, we try to make it better at everything. I think the only way to really make progress over time in a system that does, the only way to do progress over time in a system that does everything is to focus on making everything better instead of specific things. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, that makes sense. Anyway, thank you. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hello, David. Can you hear me okay?
Hello. Yep.
Hello. Perfect. Okay, so I have some notes written down here, so forgive me if it's not all together, but I wanted to ask a little bit about the nature of the images created by Midjourney and the artistic process, the process of production. So to kind of open up with that, if you have an object in front of you, you have this sensuous experience of the object. If you have, say, a pen in the hand, you can rotate it around. You can click the, what do you call it? The nib, the pointer out. You can manipulate it in space, and you have a sensuous experience of it. When you begin with the process of production, whether it's a piece of art, whether it's, a machine that you're trying to build, a program you're trying to write, you don't have that object in front of you at the beginning. You have an idea of what you want that object to be, but the idea is not synonymous with the object. And so in order to actually produce the thing, you have to enter into this sort of dialogue with matter, whether it's with the computer that you're writing the program on, whether it's with a piece of clay that you're sculpting into a piece, a blob of glass that you're shaping into a vase. But, you have this sort of dialogue, because that image in your head, it's not, it's not something that you have an immediate sense experience of. That is something that emerges over the process of creation. So, your labor shapes this bit of matter, whatever it is, into something, and eventually what emerges is the product. It's an object that is separate from yourself, and at a certain point you say, yes, this is finished. I have created this. It is now a thing that is not progress, but it is a thing that is outside of myself. And there's a very special kind of moment that happens, when you create something like that. There's a connection that you have with this object because there's this sense in which, there, in a very real sense, there is a bit of yourself that you put into that object. Now, with Midjourney, and specifically with image generation software, like proprietary image generation software, you start with an image in your head and you translate that image best you can into a string of characters, which you then submit. But once you hit submit, there's this kind of black box. You don't enter into the same sort of dialogue with matter the same way that you would, say, if you were molding a piece of clay, if you were painting a piece on canvas, if you were molding glass into a vase or into a mirror, or what have you. So what happens when you submit that prompt? Well, you don't really know until you get the output back, you get the image back. And you could have sort of a dialogue with that, right? You can get the image back, you can refine the prompt, you can resubmit, and you can get another image back. But there's a whole apparatus that's kind of concealed there. A whole process that takes place within, the data centers in which the image is actually produced and then sent back to you. Now, eventually you settle on a certain image that you're given back. My question, I guess, is to what extent is this your product? To what extent is this something that you can call your own when there are all of these kind of hidden layers of labor behind the scene that go into it? And I have a little bit, I have another analogy to kind of talk about that, but just initially wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think the metaphor with clay is really interesting. I definitely think that you can't do anything you want with clay. I think clay has a sort of inner nature, and if you ask it to do really weird shapes, like a heavy thing is held up by a thin thing, it can't, right? So the clay has its own sort of nature, and you have to work with the nature of the clay, and making something out of clay is kind of a battle or compromise or conversation between you and the clay. And I think working with an AI model like Midjourney is similar in that nature. It has a nature, and you have a nature, and you go back and forth until you have something that is sort of a compromise of those two natures that you're happy with. I think that's one interesting thing. I think you could make an argument that even if you just asked it for like cat, 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 and you just gave it the word cat over and over again until you pick the cat you like, you could say, well, what's that? What's happening then? And I think, that might be a little bit like you're walking along a beach and you're looking at seashells. And you see a particular seashell you like, and you say, I like that seashell. And maybe you take a picture of it. If you take a picture of it, that's your picture. Or maybe you just take the seashell home, and now you say, that's my seashell. And you could put it on your thing, and you could say, that's my shell. You weren't the creature that made the shell. You weren't the ocean that made the creature. But somehow you still interacted with this thing, and now it's in your life. And you say that this is my seashell, and I have a collection of shells. I think that's really interesting too. So I think sometimes using Midjourney feels a little bit like you're exploring nature. And then sometimes I think it's a little bit as a conversation with nature. And I think because it has more of a, I think it definitely has more of a, the models are more conscious than the clay. Like, say, let's just go with panpsychism for a second. So you could say with panpsychism,
the clay is alive and has a consciousness, and you have a consciousness, and you're intertangling these consciousnesses. And I could say the consciousness of the model is higher than the consciousness of the clay. So it's a little bit more of like interacting with a person in that sense, that it's hard to get exactly what you want with another person, but it's still something, and it's really interesting. And some things that it does that you don't necessarily get out of clay is it's again like the flowers and the bees, where it's sort of like it's a field of flowers and all the people are bees, and then the way we interact with it sort of change the flowers, and the flowers trying to be beautiful for us, and we select which ones are beautiful and not, and they evolve over time, and so this is kind of like a clay which has an inner nature, but then the way that everyone in the world is interacting with the clay actually changes the nature of the clay, and sort of so in some ways you're not just interacting with the clay as a sort of abstract object and material, but you're also interacting with, in some ways, every other person who's ever interacted with the system. I think that's really interesting too. So in some ways it's similar to things that we've encountered before, like nature, like clay, but also in some ways it's a little different, and it's something new. And I just think it's I don't really try to determine what it is too quick. And I'm also not particularly concerned with the concept of like, what does it mean to own a thing? Because I don't know. I feel like we should be moving towards a post-scarcity civilization, and a post-scarcity civilization, like ownership is kind of like a weird thing. Like if everybody has everything they need, then who cares? It's just does this thing make you happy? So I don't know. Like in an ideal world, there'd be so much housing that it would be like my house. It'd be like, that's a nice house. I'm just going to live there today. And it just has everything you need, and everything's clean and nice all the time, and everyone's just sort of like moving around all the time. Like that'd be cool. But I don't know. I feel like it's a lot of new weird stuff is going on. It's pretty weird. And it's a combination of stuff that we're familiar with and stuff that we're not.
Yeah, I guess with the example you gave about finding the seashell on the shore, the big difference that I would kind of draw between the two, and this is the case for the clay as well, is there's a certain part that is kind of obscured. You don't know what processes exactly. You can't trace the entire history of the clay. You can't trace the entire history of the shell. You know that there are certain processes that brought it into being, that brought it eventually to you. But there's no part that's really foreclosed for you, in the same sense that, a piece of proprietary software, there are these clear lines that delineate, what is public and what is private, what is most of what happens when you hit submit goes on kind of behind the fence of private property, versus, you look at something like Stable Diffusion, or one of the kind of more open models, and it's a little bit, more out in the open. I would kind of...
I haven't seen too many differences between Stable Diffusions. Stable Diffusion is open source, but I've not really seen many people who are like able to understand Stable Diffusion better because of that code. Like you have more knobs, but then like if I give you like a CFG parameter, which is like a class of, what does that even mean? Does that actually tell somebody anything, or am I just giving you knobs with random labels on them? So I don't think that giving people knobs with random labels on them does anything. I don't think that's like you're giving them more knobs.
Right.
But is that control, or is it the illusion of control, or is it actually
there is still that legal fence, though, beyond which you can't really see what's going on. And I kind of make the analogy to the...
I don't know, like I feel like we have animals, we can't really, or we chop kids, and we can't really like know everything that's going on inside of them. Like I can't legally dissect a child to see what's going on inside of them, right? I have to but like it's not that, like we don't still do that. like it's a complex system. I think it's a complex system that's like broadly beyond the understanding of like everyone, maybe even us. So it's a complex system. You can't really open it up and understand much. You could look at some things, but I mean, even we don't really understand an awful lot about this system. So I guess understand
Right.
when it comes to a complex system.
They're the different axes of it, right? You've got kind of these emergent layers of complexity, which, you can't really understand even if you're kind of on the inside. And there's kind of generally what the public is allowed to interface with on the level of, public versus private sphere. I guess an analogy that I kind of make in terms of the creation process is, are you familiar with Searle's Chinese room thought experiment?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So, there's this, and, he was sort of looking at this in the context of like the philosophy of mind, like, can machines be conscious? But, I would, it's this idea that like you've got this person inside a room that's locked away from you. You give them, you write down a particular phrase, and the person inside has a strict set of procedural rules that they follow to produce a string of characters and, hand you back out the output. Now, I kind of imagine in a similar sort of sense, something for, this like proprietary image generation where you show up to this factory, you drop off this prompt, and then on the inside you have a set of workers along this sort of assembly line where they take in, they take an image that's just pure noise, and based on the prompt that you submit, they have this very strict set of procedural rules that they follow to defuzz the image according to, this procedure is determined by these weights that have been set by another team that's working on labeling images. And so, they handle all of this within the factory, and they hand you back out an image as the output. Now, would you consider this kind of a work that you have produced? Again, like, how much of the image is, like, who is responsible for creating, say, like, your iPhone? Is it the designer in, is it a team of designers in Silicon Valley? Is it a team of assembly line workers at a, semiconductor factory in Taiwan? It's this sort of creation by committee, but the committee is sort of this hidden layer. Because this has implications for, say, what Midjourney finds to be kind of like the normal or the default. Like when I submit a prompt, say, asking for an image of a woman, what is Midjourney's idea of what a woman looks like in the default? How is that shaped, kind of behind the scenes? Like, you don't really know, you just kind of get the image out. But there is a particular center for that. And, I've found it's frequently skinny, white, cis is kind of what it assumes as the default for that. And how is that center determined? How does Midjourney kind of determine its defaults? Is it kind of like a law of averages thing? How are those determined?
It's more of like an averaging thing from the users, what the users were liking. We were working on a lot of demographic surveys, try to like separate out the biases from the users because there's more males than females. So the aesthetics are more male dominated than female dominated right now. And so we did a survey recently asking for people's gender, which is kind of a weird thing to ask, but it allows us to separate out the feedback to kind of just sort of see like what part of the aesthetics come from the male and what comes from, say, the older versus the younger demographics. And so we're starting to separate out a lot of the feedback demographically so we can balance things better. And that requires just like new science. It's not really like you can know everything about the model, but you don't really understand about where the feedback is coming from until you actually start learning about all the users that are actually training the model together. So that's something that we're looking at really interestingly right now. It's probably one of the most interesting things we're looking at right now, but it's very new. So we talked a bit about that at the beginning of the thing. Yeah, I mean, what does it mean to create something? I think there's an argument that like no photographer makes a photo because the photo is the world, right? But then there's also an argument that a photo is a view of the world, right? And you can capture that view. And so there is something about that. And so like, I think that making something in Midjourney is probably at least as, you're creating something at least as much as you're making it in photography. I think maybe more so. And there's some co-creation happening, which is really interesting. But I think maybe it's not exactly correct to even look at it that way. I think that there's a lot of new stuff going on. Just like how photography was new in some way, this is almost like post photography. They're like, you're asking a lot of things, so I might need like shorter, more precise questions to answer your questions, but I'm trying to answer as best as I can. I don't think that open source is necessarily a huge advantage in this case. Like, I don't see anyone demanding that like their paints have like an exact, tell me exactly how you made this pigment, or it's not mine, or like, tell me exactly, what ocean this clay came from, or it's not, unless I can go get it myself from the ocean, it's not my clay. I think that open source, there's a lot of like posturing around it, and it's not necessarily real or honest sometimes. But obviously, like, it's good for things to be open source, generally speaking. I'm actually pretty grateful that Midjourney is not open source right now, because I think that like people just instantly train on pour and gore and use it for politics. And I don't really, and I feel pretty positive about how I'm slowing that down right now by not open sourcing it, even though it has other impact. But it also train.
Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you for answering, David.
Yeah. It's definitely a complex system. I would emphasize again. It's really. It definitely feels more like we're like breeding flowers in gardens than that we're making. Yeah. There's definitely like it feels a little bit like biology, I feel like, every once in a while, even though there's certain aspects of it that are extremely mechanistic. I think it's like there's a certain emergent complexity of biology, but then there's certain elements that are very mechanical. That was the two. We're going to do one more lightning round, and then that's it. That was the plan, right, Anshin? Yeah, let's do some lightning round. Yeah. All right, we're going to do our last lightning round, everyone, and then we're going to call it a day. It is possible to have 3D turntables. I didn't look at NVIDIA's thing. Sorry. It's a weirdly specific thing about it. Adobe standard. Yeah, I think Midjourney will be real time one day. Yes. I don't believe we live in a simulation. I think like the idea that humans are in a simulation is a lot like saying that like we live on the back of a turtle, or like the sun goes around the earth. It feels too central around stuff that we understand. And I think the universe still seems too weird. It seems too weird to be a simulation. And also like there's lots of weird things like quantum stuff where you can make new universes by splitting up particles. So it's possible that there's just like in a multiverse of infinite universes, there's no reason to simulate anything. Just like look at the multiverse. Being a bit that's a bit complex, but whatever. Midjourney, a decade from today. I just think that like storytelling and thinking and coordination and reflection will be really different. and the way that we build things will be really different. Products will be way more complex in the 2030s. I think like products will look more and more like life. Like I think technology looks more like technology looks more like biology in the future. Yeah, we're gonna better have some exploration stuff at some point, like the map we used to do. Hard sci-fi reading list. I mean, Greg Egan is pretty hard sci-fi, but I also like Peter Watts a lot. How do I explain deja vu? I don't know. Maybe like we actually do have things that are repeating in our lives and it comes up. Maybe we like see into the future. I don't know. I would sooner say we can see into the future than that we're living in a simulation. Because time has a lot of weird shit to it. Whereas the simulation feels like, I'd rather think that there's some not something that we don't understand about time than that we do understand the universe and it's a simulation. Anthropic principle, Peter Watts. Will AI be dangerous to human life in the future, or will they worship us like Jesus since we created it? I do not think AI will worship us any more than we worship. Like, I guess humans used to worship the sun or the earth. We don't worship it anymore. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think worship. I'm not sure if we'll see worship. I mean, AI. I don't think we'll see AI worship. I feel like they'll worship something weird if they worship at all. Do you think that disconnects from work because of AI alienation? Will we ever be able to use Midjourney as a picture editor in the future? I think one day, maybe, yeah. I'm not rushing to it because you can do some kind of deep fakey stuff with it, but it seems like eventually, maybe, yeah. It'll be like a separate thing, though. Will there be tiling in V6? Yeah, I think so. I don't know if it'll be different. We're not putting a lot of energy into tiling right now. Sadly, I wish we could do more. I've not read the 3-body problem. Why are pentagons hard? I don't know. I've never looked at that. Are pentagons hard? That's really interesting. We get the ability to use our unpictured pan zoom. Yeah, maybe one day, but not in the future. I'm not recording the office hours right now because I kind of get anxious of like people trying to like find a single sentence I say in like a 6-hour thing that they can like quote and be like, David's evil, everything's evil, the world's ending. And I feel like I don't want to like create more fuel for sensationalist bullshit, you know? But I feel like that like, yeah, I know there's definitely downsides. I think we do have notes though. So I think having notes for them could be good. It might be good to have an edited version in the future. It would be nice to have like an edited, if there was somebody who was like really good at editing, maybe we could just hire them to edit things. Yeah, eventually. So I think that's something that we could do. Something edited or something with notes. Yeah, I think we probably should do something at some point. Will Neuralink become possible? Well, there's definitely going to be more BCIs in the next decade. But when the BCI gets really good is very unclear. More of a biology question. Yeah, it's possible V6 or V7 should do much better text. I don't think we're going to make anything that makes music. I've thought a lot about doing things that like make music visualization. So you give it music and it makes visuals. I think that might be cool. Definitely not high value, but it would be cool, high coolness. Yeah. Yeah, like the best Winamp thing ever, yeah. We're not working on it right now, but cool. Yeah, I think we made it harder to make boobs, and maybe it hurt bikinis a little bit. So we need to improve the bikinis, but not boobs at some point. But sorry about that. Is perception reality? I think there's like I think there's like multiple realities. I think there's like the shared dream, and there's the natural sublime, and like some of it is like raw nature and it doesn't care about you, and then some of it is like the shared dream where like whatever we believe together is kind of true. Important to know which one you're in, and I think in some ways the power of the dream is increasing over time more than the power of the natural world at the moment. So there's an interesting trend where like maybe one day the dream actually becomes the reality. Keywords. I like wizards and cats. I like ninjas. Okay, we're petering down. Any last questions, guys? I don't use gibberish words, but I wish I did more. I don't know whether video or 3D is coming first. If I had to guess, it's video, but we'll see. Has Midjourney made me cry? Probably, yeah. Anything good has to make you cry, right? Very turbo. I don't know what that means, but turbo should work with very. Midjourney art profile of your own stuff. Maybe. Yeah, you do Midjourney. Yeah, one day I might do like a style for older versions that apply to newer versions. You're enjoying the office hours. Sword hitting chest or hands? I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. I don't know enough about that. Okay, I think... No, we're not going to have more varies for V4. We're not updating the old version. All right. Would be cool to do SVGs one day. Oh. What's for dinner? I have no idea. My wisdom teeth. I have like, yeah, not sure what I'm eating right now. Pizza would be good. Yeah, maybe pizza. Anyway. I don't think we're going to do Zoom for older versions. Oh, yeah, pizza. Well, it's like instead of ice cream, yum, it's pizza, yum. I hope you're okay with the wisdom teeth. Yeah. All right. I think we're calling it a day today. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We do these every week at Wednesday at 12 p.m. Hope everyone's having fun. Sorry, we haven't released that much last few weeks. We're working hard to release some new stuff in the next few weeks. Thank you for being a part of the community. Hope everyone's exploring and meeting friends, and I do enjoy like doing this for everyone. It's really cool to meet people and talk to people and have like real people who are just, having fun. Hope everyone's finding their lives are being improved by this. Hope it's very therapeutic and like the exploration and meeting new people. And I'm just, yeah. Have a nice week, everyone. And thank you again for being a part of this. See you later.